just to say to all of the beautiful teachers of Continuum now, this particular sense of the nervous system meeting the mystery is what we all really deeply love. That is the call, really, that calls us into this work. And our job is always, how do we help someone who is caught in fight-flight, who's caught in a limited frame of reference? And in part, it's about having a more creative context for finding movements that come out of the cultural frame. It doesn't matter which culture it is. It truly doesn't. But it's what are the soundings, movements, ways of starting to inhabit this body, which is a planetary cosmic body also, simultaneously. And so the context is quite important, to create a context of enough safety to take risk and enough openness of permission for people to start to play around and begin to find movement. Like, I wasn't traumatized when I met Emilie. I was, everybody has some traumas from their growing up. It's not, it's kind of just the nature of life. But I'd never been in such a creative context. And so that's my promise for whatever groups I teach, whatever context. It's like how to help the context itself become juicy, how to help the co-creation, the sensibility. Like, I as a teacher am offering everything that I've ever come to know, all the amazing teachers I've had. But simultaneously, every student in the room is teaching the teacher, and the teacher is offering to the student. And there's the power of the conversation in movement, in the ideas, in stirring the pot of meaning, in hearing where is someone, and if I'm meeting or working with someone who's terribly afraid, just to start to be with, the being with that which is afraid can start a process, because the being with capacity is like an open attention that isn't in itself afraid. Awareness is not afraid. So how do we come and be with that nervous system that's just yearning for something? So there's like 3 threads, I feel, in Continuum, or in any really good dynamic creative process, which is, one track is healing. We're untangling some of the knots that got put in, where some of the tissues, like from an accident, they've frozen in a certain way, and we're helping that free. So there's a healing aspect. There's a creative, like soulful, find one's own soulful voice. What's your medicine? Let's see what helps it come forth. A creative process. And then there's a third, which is a kind of dissolution. It's a melting of identity and any kinds of fixation of ways of being. And I'm melting into, it's like a moving meditative type space. You're melting into the larger wholeness, really, and learning how to think from the perspective of wholeness instead of so much fragmentation. So we are helping people, and that means we each have to do our work.
That's beautifully and very helpful, I think, for our community to access that. But how do you see this work moving further?
That challenge of how to speak about it has been there from the very beginning. Like witnessing both Emilie, for all the years, my first years of studying with her, and then as I was teaching and also helping develop the work, ongoing challenge about metaphor and different ways of thinking about it and speaking about it, and what was emphasized in the work itself. And I'm so grateful. It's like almost 45 years for me now. It'll be 45 years this January. To have that rich, long history and watch that it was evolving a lot throughout all this time. And yet there's certain principles that have always been like, they're like the the fundamentals of it, right? And then one part that was so beautiful between Emilie and I, were quite different, and any of the current teachers that some of the teachers knew both of us and some didn't know both of us. So, but in that process, because we were so different, there was an appreciation of the difference, actually. And it helped Continuum have a wider dynamic range, a wider spectrum because of that. And I had the really wonderful experience of feeling like whatever is the deep wave of Continuum, if we want to name it in that way, coming through me, and me singing the songs that I would sing in the way that I do. And then to go on and help train the whole first round of teachers, which was all about acknowledging the uniqueness of every single one and the contribution. It's like a good garden. A really good, strong garden has a big variety of plants in it. They're not all trying to be the same, whatever it is. But it's about communication. Like an ecosystem that works well is one that each of the species has evolved together and they can speak to one another, and the differences like become important. Like what's something's out-breath, the green one's out-breath is our in-breath, right? So as we grow as a community, it's really important, our collaboration and our co-creativity, and to really deeply listen and to honor the innovations that different people come up with at the same time, while seeing if there's a kind of enough coherency of recognition of what is something that makes the flavor of Continuum, right? And I'm thrilled beyond belief that we now have so many people that have taken this up and that are bringing unique sensibilities and sensitivities. And everywhere, like when I started to travel for the first time, I was the first person that took Continuum to different cultures. So the first time I went to Finland and Germany, and I thought, oh my goodness, this could be such a California woo-woo kind of a thing. Like, will it be relevant? Will people like be interested in this? And the fat answer was absolutely yes. I had to meet certain cultural gifts and restraints. First time teaching in Japan, oh my goodness, everybody was just so quiet. And then finally, but relevant. But then this is also the question, is you have to meet people where they are. So we know that we're meeting some of the most tremendous, difficult challenges. We're a planet in crisis, nature in crisis. We're humanitarian crisis. We have justice, social justice crisis. We're in a huge, gigantic, I would say, human initiatory process right now. And this kind of work, and any of the works that helps us to be more deeply, profoundly felt sense connected, is important. And then also what helps us really deeply dream outside the cultural boxes that have gotten us in this mess in the first place, which are dissociation, too much objectification, too much other is enemy, instead of recognition of we need sacred other to keep growing. And to be able to appreciate the differentiation through conversation, through dialogue.
The form of Continuum changed quite a bit. You're already our living example of how the form changed over the years, and over the I guess how the way I perceive it is how this wisdom, this knowledge is moving through our consciousness and through our bodies, and that's how we can recognize it and start to make sense of it, finding meanings also at some point that actually this does that, or allow me to see like this, or to have this type of experience. Is your sense that maybe the form will continue to change as well? And
I think I think the forms will, because that's the nature of creativity, is the formings and dissolvings are happening. That's what happens. And so it's not about the form, it's about really deep understanding of the primary values and principles. And then you see where there's the resonance with someone. Like in my private practice, every single person who enters the door, that's a mystery to me. And it's an ongoing mystery for me for the entire time that I work with somebody. And there's layers upon layers in the psyche and in movement, like we're pouring through what's both creative and healing. And sometimes we're in the excavation of somebody else's dream is living in your in your being, in your body, and it's not even really your own, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's ancestral.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of peeling of skins that don't really belong, beliefs and thought forms and that make a physical manifestation. So I think we are in such a time of huge, huge, huge transformation culturally all over the planet, or we won't survive. I mean, and it's like there's a kind of deep capacity of love that all of us are capable of, and that we can view the world and the planet and the nature processes with to come back into a far deeper harmony. And maybe that comes back to the word balance. Yeah, the balance of how we are not trying to any longer engineer, manipulate, manage. It's like wilderness doesn't like to be managed, wants to be wild. So how to be wild with. I've never been able to see, like, I never would have imagined all the places I traveled, all the ways that this work would unfold me and take me. I would never have guessed from when I started. And for Emilie too, I watched her like be totally terrified to travel with the work and really take it out on the road. And then our studio ended and she had to, we all had to. And then the growth that came out of it. So we're meeting unprecedented crisis and circumstances, and we need those who can think, move outside of the box of the conundrums that have gotten us into this in the first place. So we need feelers, those who can actually sense and feel and have a deep felt sense and be listening. And it's always in some way like the more deeply I can uniquely meet who comes to me, the better it is. If I have a program I want to place on them, we all know what that's like. If we go for body work or psychology and that we're too much inside of someone's system, it's like never going to work that well. Because what any one of us need is how to see that unknown that's been yearning for a new expressivity, something to come forth. And so the more deeply I can meet someone really where they are, and then keep proposing different movement and psyche experiments, explorations, and be with them in the emergence. And then watching and feeling for the place where we're both suddenly touched. Because there's an insight, there's an understanding, there's a felt sense like, ding, ding, ding. Oh, that's what support feels like. Oh, that's what freedom feels like. Oh, yeah, then we know, okay, it's an element of surprise, element of wonder. And like wonder is such a beautiful thing. Like I can stand before like a redwood in California. I can stand before the redwood, and in one sense I know redwood. But in the other sense, if I can stand before that living presence as a living presence and not know, like really like open to be touched in the immediacy of the moment by that living intelligence and that living presence, and how that's touching me, and how is my sight and attention and consciousness being with that. And then we have something that's never existed before, is that moment of creative perceiving happening between both of us. Yeah. And so that's where I feel like we will find our way in these crises that we're in. Yeah, it's a depth of presence and resonance, and willingness to be touched and willingness to be changed. Yeah.
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 Beautiful.
I think, in one sense, the dance is always about both trusting, for each person to really trust the thread of interest that they have and keep finding the different ways to communicate it. And at the same time, to not be self-involved at all. It's not about like, what am I doing and what am I bringing and how am I bringing it? It's like though it is about listening to the deep, the way I often frame it, soul of Continuum. Like, what is that arose through Emilie, arose through me, arises through people that get so attracted to this work, and to listen, to keep really listening to that. And then it is important that we listen to one another, that we find our contexts in the meetings and in smaller conversations like we're having here, where we hear what are you in love with? What are you streaming and dreaming with on these themes of Continuum and the different aspects of it, and how is it unfolding in you? And that is the flavor, like what brought every class alive in the early days. That flavor was in the room always. There was a sense of interest, of listening to the field, the larger field that's telling us constantly there's larger forces operating. And it's like, if I'm teaching and I get hung up in how am I doing, I always get self-conscious, and then a shame wave hits and I can't think of what to say. But if I'm more immediately actually attending both who's in the room and where is the interest popping, where are things happening, I'm simultaneously listening. I gave the gesture of behind, below, above, around. It's kind of like a larger intelligence force wave that's swimming through, and it's going to take individual expressions. One time Emilie asked something, somebody was asking her about the creative wave, like, how are you finding this? And she then referenced the Beatles, and that someone was asking them, how did you guys, like, how did you come up with so much amazing music and become so successful? And it was either Paul or John, I don't know which one, said, we're just riding a wave, man. And it was true. There was a wave coming in the 60s, and the Beatles had, their minds were open in a particular way that was the right moment of singing. They sing about love, they sing about, all that, and we were all dancing. I remember as a teenager, just dancing to this music and feeling this sense of alive, like something's breaking through the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the stiffness, and that we were free to move the pelvis and free to have eros and connection. And they were on the forefront of a big wave, but there were many in the same. We have to be attentive to what is the wave of our times and what are the demands in our nature, culture, in our humanity, and listening for that and deeply doing our own work, every one of us, to really be doing our own, where we need to clear up, where we're blind, where we're in too much of the objectification or consumerism, eat up the earth instead of be a gift of the earth that we're meant to be.
Wow.
So we have to honor, see each other's gifts, really help each other. It's like the state of listening. Like, if I know how to really listen to you when you're teaching, if I know how to really deeply listen, things will come through you didn't even know you were ready to say, right? So we both have to be in expressing, trusting what's expressing through us, but really ultimately depth of listening. In that, my listening, it's like every pore of the skin is willing to be touched, not defended, not contracted. If I go there at some moment, okay, but then how to open to the larger the larger processes and to what's actually going on, and to dare to be touched. And we have a lot of people burning out in the caregiving world because there is so much crisis and so much trauma. We have to have deeper creative life to meet it, because if you try to meet it from an ordinary place and too much empathy and not enough view, zoom out, vast, big view, like space itself can hold everything that's occurring. Earth is holding everything that's occurring, like bond with that, connect with that, the waters, connect with that, like that personal, impersonal, intimate, vast, simultaneously.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how the form of the different form of continuum are also emerging and changing all the time according to these contexts.
Yeah, we're needed. That's all I want to say. We are needed.
Okay.
This world needs what we have. The more that we're on the computer, the more we're in the virtual world, the more people need a somatically wise astronaut, somonaut. Yeah.
I think we need you, Susan.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you so much for
welcome.
this time together, and
thank you.
And it's a great gift you've been giving.
You.
Thank you.